Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of title tracks, checking out songs that share their name with an album. Today we're going to be moving on and looking at Porcupine Tree with the track Deadwing, which of course shares the title with the album Deadwing. Let's check it out, see what's going on. So we got a 12-beat phrase, water coming in, a train, trolley, train, very ambient. Interesting way to kick off an album. This is the first track on the album. Bass coming in real strong. Really taking their time with the intro here. Really nice division between the layers, having the bass at the bottom, the left guitar up top, and then this medium guitar sitting in the middle, pitch-wise and production. Oh, that's a synth pull in the middle and the vocals. It's a really interesting track. It's also interesting to note that while some of the overlying stuff changes, our bass and drum have not really altered much at all from their debut. There we go. Interesting use of the eighth notes on the synth to undercut all of this with that really choppy rhythm. There's also a panning effect going on in the synths. That triplet still starts off the idea, which is that comes from so far ago.
Did you know you're on closed circuit TV? Just smile at me. And a dream you had of your mom and dad on the beach somewhere, and the boys there with the camps in a cigarette, take a lullaby, find a place to hide. And from the yellow windows of the
The song does this interesting thing where it feels like it doesn't move at all, but then you realize that you're in some place completely different and you don't know how you got there. And this is just our opening again. They reuse so many things, but it's in such a strange pattern. There's always some sort of tie back. Always. Nothing new happens in a vacuum. Interesting placement for the guitar as well. The guitar felt like it had been ripped in half, and most of it was placed over on the left, but there was still some part of it on the right. And like all the groove here comes from the guitars. The drums are the same they were last section. And that's very close to our intro synth line. All right. Everything on this track is connected to what comes before it. We start off the song with constant eighth notes on the synth, and I had counted off a 12 beat phrase. We never saw that again. Everything else was 16 beat. Up until we revisited just this lone synth again. I'm not sure what to read from that. Porcupine Tree, especially Steven Wilson in particular, compositional decisions are very specifically chosen. There's no luck or randomness from my understanding of their composition styles. So I feel like it means something, but I'm just lacking the knowledge to figure out what. Um, Or maybe I'm missing it entirely. Maybe it is a 16-beat phrase, it's just on a larger picture than what I was gathering. But the lick itself, the riff, repeats every 12 hits. Or no, they were 16. Sorry, they're eighth notes. So it'd be every 24th hit, every 12 beats. Again, it's the only place that does this. In a sense, it feels incomplete the way that it is. When you compare it to the rest of the track, working off of the standard 16-beat, 4 bars of 4/4 idea, this section could be read as an incomplete version of what we would get. And we do eventually build pretty much everything off of this idea. Rhythmically, we play off of it, whether it's in the drums or the guitars or the bass. Um, and the rhythms that we build off of it in those end up influencing other instruments, including the vocals, but even each other. This idea does come back in a full 16-beat idea. We get to see an expansion of it beneath the chorus. And it also gains a secondary component where it pans from left to right gradually while it's doing it. We also hear a variation of this idea with a different set of notes, but still a continuation of these series of eighth notes. Everything is built off of this idea. This is the most simplistic, bare bones version of it, and we only ever hear this exact concept one more time, twice more. But it is the foundation of everything in the track. And see, another thing I have to take into account though is that it's also not just the intro to the song, but the intro to the album. That could also be why it has a differentiating element to it, being the 3 bars of 4/4 rather than the 4 bars. I don't know. Maybe it makes more sense within the context of the album in that case. From here on out, though, we hear a building of this. We have a eighth note line. Sorry, we have a bass guitar line that is a series of eighth notes, eventually shifting towards syncopation and creating a really groovy, moving idea underneath the guitar work. And we have a couple of guitar lines in here. We have a new synth line that comes in that's mostly atmospheric. We have the vocal line that comes in, that's our core melody for our verse. As I mentioned, for our verse and pre-chorus, I don't know what to call it. The structure is kind of strange in this one, um, but they share the same bass and drum ideas. The guitars, the synth, the vocals all change, but the bass and the guitar don't. We don't see a shift in these instruments until we hit our C section, which is the groovy rock section. That's when we get a really big rhythmic change. Interestingly, though, it retains that triplet feel on the opening of the phrase from our verse, from our A section. So there's always a callback of some sort. We still have the synth going on in the background. Um, and see, what's really strange to kind of shift this away from should we shift it away from building blocks? Not yet. I want to stick to this idea of foreshadowing and lending of ideas. Eventually, the guitar, I believe, picks up on what the synthesizer was doing in this C section. And so there's this concept, you know what I was talking about, is that the song never really feels like it goes anywhere until it does. And then we're just somewhere completely different. It's like you just blink and your surroundings are very different. You don't know how you got here, but there's a lot of similarities. You're picking up on concepts. That vase hasn't changed at all. How has everything in the room changed but not the vase? And now you're like, how did I even get here? What is this place? And that's what this song feels like to me, because there's so many callbacks So many places where we reuse an older element, sometimes completely, sometimes a variation of, sometimes changing timbre. Um, or it's a rhythmic component that stuck around or that we're calling back from a few sections ago. Everything is interconnected. So even when we have these drastic soundscape changes, and you can definitely say, hey, we're in a brand new section, this feels totally different. You're still like, oh, wait a second, this actually comes from A section. And this just is one extra note added to this line from the B section. And this is brand new, but the chord progression is like three of the chords from this part. And you start to really see all the connective tissue. And so it feels like we jump to these places and you're just like, how did we get here? But there also has all these callbacks. So there is this connective thread taking us between every aspect of this song, even though we're jumping to these sweeping changes and jumping to these new places. And so that's where I got my description of standing in place but going to new places. And I don't know what they're necessarily trying to evoke with that, but when paired with the atmosphere of the song, which I don't know exactly what it is. I don't have the words specifically to put this into, but it's it's haunting in some ways. Haunting's not unsettling. Does anybody else get an unsettling feeling here? There's definitely moments of beauty throughout this track in all the sections. It's not even just like, this one section's beautiful. No, there's a beautiful element to all of it. There's a little bit of sadness. I don't know if there's necessarily joy in any of this. It is a bit of a darker, grim track, but it's not overwhelmingly heavy either. It has these really beautiful moments that almost feel hopeful in a way. Again, there's not like designated major chord sections for like, oh, this is the hope, the beauty aspect. But it's just not fully sad. But overall, the one thing that really sticks with me the entire time is unsettling. No matter what section we're in, no matter what emotion it's mixed with, the song doesn't ever let me feel completely free of tension. And so when we have this song that is both familiar and unfamiliar simultaneously, like being in a dream where there's a part of you that knows it's a dream, but the other part of you is just like, this is just normal, the typical dream logic stuff, where, if you were awake, you'd be freaking out, like, this is not how real life works. But because you're in a dream, you just kind of go with the flow, and there's that feeling at the side that things aren't right, but you don't really pay attention to it. And that's kind of what this feels like. It is very unsettling in a lot of ways, but that tension, that unsettling feeling is uh it's both ever present and also hidden. It's not on the surface at all. And it pairs very well with this idea of just winding up in new places and not knowing what's going on, but feeling like you've been here before. Very eerie. Now, there is one section that kind of changes the pace a little bit. We kind of enter into sort of a spacey rock thing going on in the middle of the track, and we get a synth solo, we get a guitar solo. Interestingly, the guitar solo I think is my favorite part of this because it feels like it doesn't know what to do. We get it feels sort of like a jazz solo where you kind of get these pockets of ideas followed by rest, and then an idea, and then rest, and then an idea. And they're not super long ideas, but I think what's most interesting about them is none of them feel complete. We basically get a series of false starts, and then the guitarist just stops trying and the synth comes in to replace it. And there's a big story to be told there, especially when we take in the eeriness of everything. It's like an idea is trying to be formed, something's trying to be said. There's a message that needs to be delivered, and no matter what you do, you can't follow through with it. You get the first couple of syllables out, and then your mouth slams shut. It's bizarre. That's a good. Actually, that's not a great word for this track because the song itself, if you just listen to it, is fine. It's very cohesive. Bizarre is actually not a good word to describe it, but the concept of the several false starts and then just giving up, that's a bizarre way to write a solo. It definitely doesn't scream lead melody to me, which it absolutely is at that moment. There's some light drum work, some light bass work. There might be a synth at the time, and then there's the guitar in the spotlight, fumbling, never quite figuring out what to do with its 16 bars of attention. Interestingly, the synth comes in after it and just smooths everything over. Beautiful solo. Again, Porcupine Tree does not do things haphazardly. It all means something. This is a song that I think is really going to open itself up after several listens. Right now, all I'm getting are the vague details, trying to piece together a blurry puzzle. Speaking of blurry puzzles, what's up with the structure here? I mean, so like I said, everything's kind of tied to everything else. So sometimes where I feel there's a new section coming in, maybe we can't classify it as that. Or maybe I didn't feel a sectional shift, but they did, and they write it as such. And, I don't know that this is going to be a definitive read of the structure at all, but let me take a crack at this because this is wild. We have our intro. I typically don't give intros letters. They're introductory ideas as based on the word itself, intro, and usually the structural sections which I give letters are going to be the main components. They are either massively identifiable or feature most of the instruments or are repeated several times. When we have this idea of verse, chorus being A, B, A, B, and we ignore the intro, that's because the intro brings us into the track and it might introduce some of the ideas of the track, but it's an incomplete portion of the track. It's designed exclusively to not just jarringly start at one of our main sections. So here we have our intro, but the intro might as well be our A section. It's not how I've envisioned it in my mind, but it's like 3 minutes long. um, and this just takes its time. We're in here for a while. We get our synth intro, we introduce the bass, the drums, the guitar. Technically, once we introduce these instruments, we're in our A section. So really, the intro is just the synth portion that we start on. So yeah, actually we'll start with that. The intros itself. Once we bring in the band, that's our A section. We eventually put lyrics on top of it. That's still our A section. Then we move to B. B only has differences on the top end. All the foundational stuff is the same. We go back to the A, we go back to the B, and then we hit C. This is the groovy rock bit. The first big change for the bass and the drums comes in like 4 minutes into the track. We explore variation on this. We could call it D. I'm going to stick with C prime. It's a variation on C. And then back to A, B. And at this point, I notice a pattern here. We have verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. This is a pretty typical Metallica 90s metal thing right here. A lot of metal bands in the 90s chose this. And eventually it'd be cut out where we take the verse out of the end and we go verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and that is pretty much our typical structure for a lot of mainstream music today. Although that final chorus is being removed now too, and we're just ending on the bridge, which is a very neat way to go about doing that. But so we have this very standard structure here at the beginning. And then we go off the rails. We have a second bridge. And this bridge changes tones a lot. We go into a very proggy element. We bring in vocal harmonies, we bring in some spicier bass work, and bass work was already great to begin with. We bring in the solo section, and we just have a series of linear ideas all within this sort of proggy space rock concept. It's almost like an entirely different song if it didn't share so many similarities to what came before it on the more micro level. And then out of nowhere, we just return back to our intro. Oh no, the intro came before this, didn't it? I don't remember now. Somewhere in the middle here. I don't know. I don't remember if it was before this bridge or if it was after our first bridge, our C, that we returned back to the intro, and we built the song back up. I think that's what it was. It was intro A B A B C, intro A B C, and then this extended prog bridge. Yeah, so that's weird too. It isn't actually a typical modern structure. It's a bit of a variation in there. We jump back to the intro, we do a verse chorus, we do the bridge again. And then from here, we expand into our prog bridge, which is a series of sections. And then we bring the song back to a close with our A and B section, followed by a variation on our intro on a new instrument as an outro slash transition into the next track. It is a wild ride of a song that both it simultaneously sets you up to expect what you would normally get from, a rock or metal band at the time, and then to subvert it around every corner as well. I think that's really all I want to say about it. It is, and see, once again, mixing the familiar with the unfamiliar. That is a common theme throughout this. In a lot of ways, this feels like a dream that's not quite a nightmare, but isn't, a happy dream, a pleasant dream, where everything goes your way. There's certainly things going on here that feel a bit out of the ordinary. The darkness creeping at the periphery of your vision, kind of thing. I think I've gotten as far as I can with the music itself. We're going to look at the lyrics and see if we can't figure anything else out about what's going on here. It's called Deadwing, man. It's both vague and very precise. Ah, man. All right, lyrics. So I think I was a lot closer than I expected to be. The song, at least the majority of it, seems to be about worrying, constant worrying or constant fear about things outside of your control, especially the things that can exist on the periphery of life. It talks about more mundane things like blowing out fuses, but also talks about larger fears like possibly getting cancer or getting unexpected news about something or even having, it appears to me, some sort of attack on a place where you're at out in public. It's about these things that if we allow them to control our life, if we continue to have this overwhelming feeling of powerlessness regarding all of these, that it's going to stop us from being able to live. But the fact is that any of this stuff could happen, and people do fall into thinking about this, and they allow it to control their lives. We even move over to a bit of a worry about from going away from physical dangers to maybe less physical ones like lack of privacy, cameras everywhere, that kind of stuff. Um, and it talks about how it's tempting to fall into this fear of everything. We also see a fear of missing out and a fear of isolation. One of the sections says a dream you had of your mom and dad on a beach somewhere, but the boys aren't there. And says you should probably find a place to hide. And I think this is interesting because later on we see this idea. It says a specter from the next life breathes his bargain of pain. I look with you into the speeding black rain, afraid to touch someone, afraid to ask her for a name, feeling separated from people once again. So there's just a lot of elements of fear throughout this set of lyrics of all these things that could scare us. The final two lines of the track, though, says, in the morning, when I find I've lost you, I throw a window open wide and step through. Now, if this was a different genre of music, probably take this to be a sort of giving up. But because it's Porcupine Tree, I want to take it in a more positive direction and view an open window as a new possibility. So, being afraid of everything through life, eventually you're going to experience one of these. As he says, I've lost you. I don't know what that's specifically pertaining to. I don't know if this has any real life connotations or parallels for any of the band members, but realizing that the worst has happened now. Instead of continuing to hyper focus on this, we take this as a moment to step through the window. And a window is an opportunity for new, sort of like an open door. And this might be a way of letting go of the past, trying to start fresh. And maybe that's what the song is about musically as well. There's the familiar, there's the unfamiliar, that would be the fears, and where they clash, and how they mix, and how nothing in life is ever brand new. A lot of things are presented in your life because I was going to say mistakes, but because of choices you've made in your past. Um, and they all lead up to where you're at. So everything's interconnected, even if they don't seem connected at all. And there is that little bit of positivity in the music. And like I said, I can't really relate it to any specific chord or key or anything like that. It's just there is a brightness to it, a beauty to it outside of the tension. And maybe that's the hope that the ending is pointed towards. You can sit in fear of everything you can't see, or you can just move on with your life and hope for the best. Because whether you worry about it or not, bad things are still going to happen. You can't stop everything, you can't control every aspect of your life. Those are my thoughts on Porcupine Tree's Deadwing. I don't know what it is about Porcupine Tree, man, or Steven Wilson in general. I feel like these are always my best analyses. The dude just writes in a way that I get. The music is clear as day. And even if not 100% sure about what it's saying, I'm usually pretty close once I read the lyrics and figure out what the implied, stated themes are. I should have put that before I said those are my thoughts, because those are also my thoughts. So this really wraps up the video, though. Let me know what your thoughts are on this track down in the comments if you enjoyed it, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on or anything like that. Above the comment section is a description box, and there's a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, we have a special selection today. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.